Hello, everybody. Here we go again. We're going to do a little instructional video here on how to graph in Microsoft Excel and how to do best fit lines. All right. Also, how to get trend lines and how to get a correlation value so that we can get a sense of how accurate our line really is. So, one of the things that we need to do is kind of get some data. And I was searching around on the internet and I found some data here about the snowy tree cricket. All right. And so the snowy tree cricket has an interesting little phenomena about it. As the temperature gets hotter, it chirps faster. And it actually chirps faster um, at a very regular rate. So you could actually count the chirps. And if you did that, then you'd have a sense of what the temperature would be. So this is a pretty decent data set, and we're going to use the data that we see up here, the number of chirps per minute versus the temperature outside, and this is what we're going to graph. All right. So what I want to start by doing up here is this window on the right. This is my Excel window. This window on the left. This is a just where I'm getting the data from. You know, this is what Excel looks like. Okay. Here, I'll put this down below here. Um, we see all the tabs across the top, all right? But in here is the main area. This is what we call the cells of Microsoft Excel, okay? And so we can do a lot of different things. We can enter data into these cells. That's what we're going to start by doing. And that's what I would say most people know how to do in Excel, is at least enter the data. Now I'm going to put these the names of these columns in here as well. So the X column should usually be your first column. In this case, it's going to be my column A. And remember, X data is what we call the independent variable. All right, and then our dependent variable would be the second column. All right, now in this case, temperature should influence the average number of chirps. So I actually don't like the way that this person has this ordered here. Because remember, the um, the independent variable, when you change that, will affect the dependent variable. So it is my contention that as the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit changes, all right, so sometimes if you ever want to use a special character, like in this case, I'm calling it temperature, and then in parentheses, I want to put my units. Um, if you're looking for something different, some like a weird symbol like a degree symbol, then we go to this insert tab and then we come over here to the symbols area and you can see we can enter a symbol. Um, and I have one that was recently used, but you can search through this and you can find some interesting things that are in there. Okay, so I'm just going to insert that and I have degrees Fahrenheit. And then over here I have number of chirps, we'll call it just chirps per minute. Okay, just like so. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start entering all my data down below here. So I have 40, oh, sorry. So look, I already started putting that in the wrong place. I have 40 degrees, I have 47, 50, all right. And I'm going to keep going here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter all these values. I'm going to pause the video for a minute while I enter those, and you can do the same thing if you're working along with this. But essentially, the one thing I want you to really pay attention to is, see how we have degrees in this column over here? All right, we don't want to put any special characters or anything when we're entering our data. So we don't want to put units into these cells. The units go up above here in the name of the cell. All right, so we just put the numbers, we just put the values that are in there. All right, so I'm going to pause and I'm going to take a second to enter all of this data. All right, so I'm back and I have all my data entered here. I'm just going to bring this up now because I'm done with my data that's over here on the list. So I have all of my data entered. I'm not going to worry about that now. So these are my two sets of data. My independent variable, all right, which is, remember, my x variable, and my y variable right over here, that's my dependent variable, that's chirps per minute. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to graph this now. All right, so there are different types of graphs that you can actually do. The one that we always prefer here is what we call a scatter plot. So if I'm on the Home tab, all right, and I want to enter and I want to put a graph on here. I'm going to go up here to this Insert tab up here at the top, all right, and I see all my charts are listed right here. Now, I know everybody loves all these other kinds of charts, but we're sticking just with the scatter, all right? So this is what we call a scatter plot, and you'll see that there are 5 different types of scatter plots. This one just has the data points themselves, and that's what we're looking for. These other things are going to connect the dots in different ways, and we never want to connect our dots, okay? It'll just look silly if we try to connect the dots. So I'm going to use that graph, the XY scatter plot. Now, sometimes if you have everything entered in the right way, you know, uh, Excel will just automatically throw data in there, okay? And that could be a good thing and that can be a bad thing. Sometimes it doesn't select the data the way that you want it to. So notice that mine is empty right now. It isn't graphing anything. So what I want to do is I want to select the data that I'm going to use here, all right? And we notice that up here, what started popping up in the top is that we have chart tools, all right? And in this chart tools, this is everything about the graph that we just created, okay? Now right now it doesn't look like anything because we haven't selected any data, but we're about to. And you see right up here in this design tab, select data is one of our options. So I'm going to click on that, all right? And we get this picture right here. So what we want to do is we want to add a new series. And if you had more than one set of data and you wanted to graph all those lines on the same thing, then we would keep adding what we call series to this. Now we're going to add one series, okay? So we're going to add one series to this, and it's immediately going to ask us some questions. So what do we want to call this? Well, I want to call this temperature versus chirps per minute. All right, so it's always independent versus dependent variable. So my independent variable is temperature. My chirps per minute is my dependent variable. So temperature versus chirps per minute. Okay. Now sometimes you can just select this if it's somewhere on your page, but I prefer just to write it in here. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select my X values. All right. So in this case, I go right over here. All right. So we have series X values. I'm going to click this little tab. And what it's going to do now is it's letting me select all of the data points that I want. So I'm going to come over here to the left, and I'm selecting all of my X data. That's my independent variable. All right. Now I just want to select the data that I have there. And so this is just entering all those values. We're going to hit this tab again over here on the right, and we've selected those values. Now I'm going to select my Y values. Okay, same thing. I could try to select the entire row, but sometimes when there's text in there, like chirps per minute, it messes it up. So I'm only going to select the values that I did. The way that I did that, I just did a regular left click and dragged it down until I selected all of those things. So then I come back over here and I hit this little tab on the right. So now I have all of my data selected, my X and my Y values. I'm going to hit OK. Okay, so we see here that it's graphing temperature versus chirps per minute. All right, it has all of my data selected. If I wanted to add another line with a different set of data, I could do it now. I could hit add, and then I could do the same thing with my next set of data, and that would put it all on the same chart. Okay, in this case, we're not going to do that. I'm going to hit OK. And so far, it's pretty good. So now we have chirps per minute. It's all graphed here. Very nice. All right, and so we're kind of seeing a little bit of a pattern here. There might be some kind of linear pattern. What I'm going to do is, you see this thing right here. In my chart, I can just basically click on this, and it's a little text box that can be moved around. If we only have one set of data, there's no sense in having a legend off to the side. And so a legend would basically tell you what those points were representing. We don't need that. So I'm just going to hit the delete button, and it'll disappear. I notice that my chart gets a lot bigger, a lot nicer, all right, and looks a little bit better. Now, again, I see my data, all right, is kind of squished into this range right in here. Now, I don't have any data points over here, so there are a lot of things that I could do, but one of the things that I usually like to do in these cases is kind of change the range of the values. So since I don't really have any values for temperatures that are less than say what, like 40 degrees, right? Then maybe I would want to cut this side of the chart out. We'll wait until after we fit a line to it, and then we'll see. But for now, that might be a possibility. Okay, so this is nice, but we want to add some more labels in, all right? And so we have the title of the entire chart, or the entire graph, but now we want to add some axis titles, all right? So I'm going to go to Layout, all right? That's my next chart tool. And notice that right up here in the Labels category, I can do axis titles. And when I click on that, I can name my horizontal axis, and I can name my vertical axis, and there's different ways of doing that. So in the horizontal axis, I'm going to put the title below the axis. And when I do that, we see that this little text box shows up, and that's where I'm going to name it. This is temperature, and we always want to include with the name also the units that we're using. So again, I need that degree thing, so I want to insert a symbol again. All right, so I can get degrees Fahrenheit in there. And now I'm going to do the same thing with my vertical axis, but now this all disappeared. Remember, it's up here, the chart tools, layout, axis title, vertical, all right. I like a rotated title, okay. They're easier to read. And this is chirps per minute, all right. So there we go. We have everything labeled properly. Everything's good to go. So this is a good start to our chart. And we're seeing that if we look at this data, we see there's a correlation. Looks like a positive correlation, so it's got like a positive slope. What we want to see is how linear is this thing, and how close does it fit a line. So we're going to add a best fit line, also known as a trend line. So those two things are exactly the same. All right, I'm going to type that right here. Best fit equals trend line. They are the same thing. All right. So in math class, you might hear it called a best fit line. And basically what the computer is doing is doing a mathematical calculation to get a line to try to hit as many points and get as close to as many points as possible. Okay. So the way that I do this is pretty simple. I come up here and I just clicked on a data point. All right. So I can click on just about anything in here. And if I click on that data point, they highlight. If I right click on that data point, then I get a bunch of options. And here I can add a trend line. Okay, so that's probably the fastest way to get to it. It's also up here in the layout area where we see trend line and the analysis. All right, so trend line. And then we get a bunch of options. So this looks to me to be a linear relationship. It doesn't look like a curve. So when I select a trend line, I'm going to select a linear trend line. Okay? I could have also done that from the right-click menu. Right-click, add trend line. And we get this larger set of options. All right? And that's important because some of these are really important. So all I did to get to that was to right-click, okay, on add trend line. And then I have linear selected right up here in the top. That's the regression type. And down here, these two check boxes, the equation and the R-squared value. All right. So displaying the equation means that this is going to give the y equals mx plus b, the slope-intercept form of that trend line. So it's got a slope and it has a y-intercept somewhere. This is going to display that somewhere out here on the page. We see it shows up right there. Okay. Yeah, so I lost that for just a second. Okay. So we have display the equation and it would display the R-squared value. Okay, so those two things. All right, and it has a trend line there for us. All right, and then I'm just going to close that. So I have an extra one here because I did that twice. But I have that information. All right. So I can change the size of these things if I want to change the size. I can move things around to make them look a little bit nicer so I can read them. But essentially, what are we seeing here? All right, we have an equation. This can be used for interpolation and extrapolation, all right, to try to predict how many chirps per minute at specific temperatures. So by plugging in any number x, which is a temperature, we should be able to calculate the number of chirps per minute that would come along with it. Now, if I look at this, look at that R-squared value, 0.729. If we compare this to what were acceptable approximations, this is not a very acceptable approximation. All right, this is not good data. All right, we get the sense that it's linear, but it is a very, very weak correlation. And so if we try to plug numbers into this equation, we're going to get answers, but they won't necessarily be exactly right. We won't necessarily hear those exact chirps per minute. There's a range in there. And so if I were looking at this, I would say that is not a good correlation, and I probably shouldn't use this to do what I'm about to do, which is use it to predict. Okay. So that's my equation, y equals 3.2122x minus 67.819. All right, that's my slope and my y-intercept. If I wanted to interpolate or extrapolate, I could use this equation to help me calculate that. And so what I'm going to show you next is a neat little trick, and I'm going to use that equation up there. All right, y equals 3.2, I'm going to type that in here, y equals 3.2122x minus 67.819. I'm just writing that down below here because of what I'm about to do with these cells. All right. So Excel can be used to do calculations. All right. So we can actually program a cell to do a calculation for us. So if I have an equation like this, so essentially this is saying y, which is chirps per minute. All I have to do is take an x value of anything that I want and multiply it by 3.2122 and then subtract 67.819, and I should get the number of chirps per minute. All right. Well, I can make this easy on myself. All right. So let's say I wanted to set this up and I wanted to do a calculation. So I'm going to just give this a little title. I'm going to call this temperature. Okay. And right below that, I'm going to enter any temperature that I like. Now, I could choose one of these ones up from the list, but let's choose a number that's not on the list. 71 degrees, for example. 71 degrees. All right, I'm going to enter that there. And basically, what this thing will do, all right, I'm about to tell it to do, is to take a temperature out of this box and then do a calculation with it and spit it into this box, so it chirps. All right. So how do I do that? Well, if I want this cell to do a calculation, I'm going to click on it here, and I'm going to start it with an equal sign. So this is what Excel knows to be an equation. So it says this cell, this rectangle on our Excel sheet, is going to show a number that's equal to whatever I plug in here. So what's it equal to? I'm going to take 3.2122, and I want to multiply it by my x value, which is my temperature. Well, that's right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that spot. Oops. Equals 3.2122, and I'm going to click on that spot. Equals 3. I'm going to do a multiplication symbol, and then that cell. So look at what happened here. All right. 3.2122 times C28. Well, what the heck is C28? That is column C, row 28, which is 71. All right. Oops. All right. So 3.2122 times that cell. So it's going to multiply it by any number that's written in that cell. And then I'm going to subtract 67.819. So all I'm doing is entering that equation. And it looks just like that, only instead of an x, it's got cell C28 there. So any number that's sitting in this cell is going to be used in that calculation. And so it says it should be about 160 chirps per minute. Pretty rad. If I change this number now, I could call it 75. It'll change this calculation. It's using whatever number is in this cell. maybe 45 degrees, 76.73 chirps per minute. So it's changing because this is using cell C28 in the calculation. It's not a specific number, it's whatever number is sitting in this cell C28 right there. Now, if I wanted to, I could do this a bunch of times, all right? So maybe here, I do a 34, and a 67, and a 54, and an 85, or something like that. What I can do is, I can come up here, and I'm going to select this cell. This is where I put that equation in, all right? This is where I put that equation in. If I come here and I see this little box and I drag this down and extend it, you see that shadow shows it's getting, basically what we're doing is we're copying the cell, but not exactly copying. It's not like copy and paste. What it's doing now is it's doing calculations with whatever number is next to it. So here it's using cell C28, all right? It's using cell C28. But here, it's using cell C29. So if I drag, it's going to keep dragging right with it off to the left. So C30, see how this one is using C31. So if I drag that down, it'll use all the values next to it. So if you have to do like 100 calculations with these things, you don't have to keep entering those numbers in. Enter them as a list, enter your equation, drag that equation and basically copy it to all those cells, and it'll automatically want to do this where it sticks whatever number is to the left. Isn't that rad? Use that one sometime. All right, so those are Excel basics. You know, as far as interpreting these things, you definitely want to look at that video to talk about the interpretation. But this is how it's done. All right, so just a quick reminder, scatter plots, right? And then once you have all of your charts, you want to make sure you have all of your names. You want to make sure you do independent versus dependent variable for your overall chart name. You add a trend line either by right-clicking here or by going to Layout here, okay, up in the top tab. And we always want to make sure that we want to include the equation and R-squared value for our best fit lines. Notice that we did not connect the dots. If we wanted to do something like that, I don't know. We don't ever do that, so please don't do that. All right. So there you go. Next lesson done. See you guys later.